No. No buzz. A Just Bees book. A Just Bees book club. A little bit ago, I read the day and night books of Mardou Fox. Mardou Fox? I don't actually know. I've never thought about saying it out loud. I'm gonna go with Mardou. Mardou Fox, a fantastical novel by Nisi Shawl, a really fantastic writer who I literally just picked up a copy of Everfair from my local library today on a little walk that I took. In part because I read a handful of Shaw's short stories, but it's been probably a decade since I had read anything prior to reading the day and night books. And I wanted to get back to some of her stuff. I think it's funny that I read two novels based on a character from another novel that is semi-canonical or straight up canonical this year. And I thought both of them were good despite having not read the original. The first of these, of course, was James by Percival Everett. Um, sort of being in dialogue with Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, that's the one. A novel I've never read, never really had any interest in. Um, the Day and Night books of Mardou Fox. Mardou Fox. Mardou Fox. I said I was going to choose, and I apparently have not. Is in direct dialogue with Kerouac's novel The Subterraneans, one I didn't even really know existed. I'm sure I was assigned on the road at some point in high school. Have I read it? Couldn't tell you at this point. Um, Beat culture never had any real appeal to me. Maybe a little bit when I was like stoned literally all the time and like 16, 17 years old, but never really dug into it, never had any real intention to. Um, I of course have an advanced reader copy. This book will have been out by the time this is recorded. I've seen the final version. I'm sure there are updates to it, but the biggest thing that I was like kind of hoping for between the advanced reader copy and the actual release have not changed, which you can kind of see here, like the way it's formatted. So uh, this is a series of diaries, basically, by Mardou Fox, who is the character in The Subterraneans based on Aline Lee, who is a black beat who wrote a handful of things, but is largely sort of left out of the cultural histories of the beats. Like I said, only ever a dabbler, never heard of her, not even once. But Shawl takes Aline Lee's character and sort of reconstructs it and puts it in a situation that sort of follows her life, but introduces some sort of fantastical elements, which I'll get to in a minute. But yeah, like I said, there's like the way that it's formatted in this advanced reader copy. You can see from my middle finger, there's like a very little thing that says September 18th, 1953. And then there's just the text as it goes. Um, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more of an elaborate treatment. You know, this is put out by Rosarium. I don't really know anything about Rosarium. I mean, they're clearly very small. I can't even recall who they are distributed through. It's probably Ingram Publishing Services, I want to say, who carry a lot of really good presses. But you know, like that's the distributor that the bookstore I work at. We will get things like AK Press through, for instance. Um, I was hoping there would be a bit more like of a font treatment at the very least, if not a more sort of slightly more elaborate graphic design element to this. I can understand to some extent the realities of publishing and the sort of projections around levels of interest about a book that is a sort of historical retelling of a forgotten beat. But I think it's a bummer that they didn't kind of go more all out in the finished copy that I have seen. Um, it's not a pretty book to look, I mean, like, you can also see just like from this, like the margins, like the like 1.5 point, 2 point double spacing, um, all make this feel like not like, I don't know, it doesn't, the material object is important sometimes, and this feels like maybe it was written maybe with an ebook format in mind first or something. I'm not really sure what the thought process was, but I know aesthetically it does not look in its interior like a really compelling book. The cover is like neat but kind of nondescript, which I guess is like saying something at this point because when I say nondescript, I don't mean it looks exactly like every other fucking book with like sprayed edges that's coming out right now, which I can appreciate that at the very least. Um, what's up, Romantasy? Yeah, and so yeah, it's the story of Mardou Fox and sort of the way that she interprets her own life, sort of intersecting with thinly veiled versions of some of the more famous beat characters. And by characters, I mean people. Kerouac's all over it. There's definitely a reference to Ginsberg. Um, and there's like probably like 12 more, but again, I don't really care for them. Meaning the actual beats. uh, but I wanted to sort of read some stuff from the beginning again, as the advanced reader copy probably has some changes to sort of get at what I think is really neat about this book. So I'm going to do that. Seemed like I was hardly warm again under the covers when I woke up knowing it was 4. I have a good sense of time. Now Mama was snoring. No sounds were coming out of Miss Purdy's place this time. I did what I said I would do, and then I noticed. Noticed what? A lot of things all at once, that the crickets had stopped, and the wind wasn't blowing any longer, and that my feet were floating and I was not actually touching the ground. I was close, but not quite on it. I felt so frightened. My stomach and everything felt empty and awful. I reached out with one hand to catch hold of the side of the apartment house, and it was a big relief when I could touch it. I started pulling myself around to the front door. I don't know what was I thinking, but I would bob up to our floor like a birthday balloon and climb in bed and gradually sink down onto the mattress like when the helium leaks out. Next I heard the music. No, that's not the right word. Not exactly heard it. The best way to say this is to say that I heard where the music would fit if it was solidly, truly real. Like that box Grandma Jerry has for silverware with velvet holes for forks and spoons. I heard those holes. They were for trumpets and drums and guitars and pianos. It was sad and grand. Majestic is how it seemed to me. Over the top of the roof rose the face of a lady shining like a golden moon. I was done being afraid, at least for the moment. The lady's face was kind and beautiful. And there's a drawing. That's what the lady looked like. She saw me and smiled. She opened her big, lovely mouth. She called me by my name. Marlene, sweet Marlene, I remember. Sort of as if she was bending over, she came nearer. You will. You're going to... She quit talking and turned like she was looking behind her and pulled back. Far enough I could see the top part of her clothes. A white shirt with the kind of collar men wear. And she had a thing like a cross on a ribbon or something around her neck. But not a cross like Miss Purdy's. Another image on the other side of the page. Oop. Right. There. It's a cross with another cross in the middle, and there's a triangle or like a three-pronged thing at the top. That's it in detail, as best as I can remember it. Okay, said the lady, not looking at me. She went away, and suddenly I was terrified. All alone in the dark, and I had dropped the flashlight. I grabbed out and found the door handle and opened the door and heard it hit something that rolled away, which of course was the flashlight, and now that had stopped working, and I couldn't find it right away, so I gave up. Halfway up the steps, I realized my feet were resting on them like usual. One creaked real loudly under my weight. In the living room, Mama stopped snoring. But I could see by the clock she was on her side with her face toward the couch cushions. I snuck past the same as I did at midnight. You'll have heard me stumbling over some of that language, and I think that's a positive thing because number one, I just stumble when reading out loud sometimes, but two, I think the maybe most impressive thing about the Day and Night books is the way that Shawl um, writes this particular character's idiolect. The way, and this is when the kid is like 8 or 10, I want to say, when Fox, when Marlene, when Aileen is like 8 or 10, and there's a big jump to when she's like in her late teens, early 20s, and then another big jump later on. And the character voice is really consistent throughout, but it's consistent via the conceit, right? It never feels like it stops being a real diary that's being written in, which is to say, it never feels like it stops being a, a version of events mediated through the written word, which of course all written texts are on some level, but at the even at the story level, the thing that's happening here is this person lives these events and then decides to write them down, and then we are given access to them as those written things and not uh, as things that were happening in the moment, right? Which is why it's great. I think that there are moments where like there are little drawings, especially in the earlier bits. And I think they're basically only in the earlier bits when Mardou Fox is younger, from what I recall at least. Um, in much the way that a child might tend to use sort of a multimedia approach, where a more adult person, like, maybe me, for instance, maybe I use myself here, right? Like, I would absolutely append little drawings, sketches, doodles to things that I was writing when I was like pretty young. At a certain point, those just disappeared because I have not practiced drawing, because I have practiced writing for a long time. I don't even practice that as much anymore. Now I just talk into a camera to myself and only other bees. Um, but there is a concern with the material, and also a really consistent, and I think, if not authentic, then believable consistency of the singular voice of the narrator throughout the entire book, which I think is very good. And I think if it didn't happen, this book kind of wouldn't work at all. At least for me, a person who has no attachment whatsoever to all the beat stuff that it's talking about, etc., etc. Um, and I think the fantastical elements that come through, and that's like sort of the first moment of their arrival. This moment of feeling like you're floating, of seeing something from outside the world and it engaging with you directly, of being someplace where there's not music, but the holes in which one puts one's fine china. And that all, I think Shaw really, really, really does that very smartly and sparingly throughout the text in a way that really leads up to the end in a nice way. It's also a thing I read in like 2 sittings, and enjoyed that aspect as well. It's sort of another one like Mandello's. Oh God, what was it called? Not The Woods All Black, not Summer Suns, the other one, the wolf one, that I basically spent 2 minutes complaining about the formatting on it, and then the video was over. That one, I do wish that it had more resources poured into it in terms of just like making the interior text look better. But that's neither here nor there, because that didn't happen. Do I have other thoughts? I don't think so. Thanks for not watching.